What do linguistics and physics have in common? At first sight, very little. One examines language and thought, the other explores matter and energy. Yet both disciplines, in the most refined forms, ask a surprisingly similar question. How does structure produce meaning? In the 1950s, Noam Chomsky, a young academic at MIT, introduced a theory that reshaped modern linguistics. He argued that language is not simply acquired through imitation or instruction, but emerges from an underlying mental framework shared by all humans. He called this framework deep structure, an internal system that enables the construction and understanding of meaningful sentences. What we speak, our surface structure, reflects a deeper, often unconscious set of grammatical rules. Chomsky proposed that this system is biologically embedded, like a kind of linguistic blueprint. Around the same time, physicists were also searching for underlying structures. What began with atoms progressed to subatomic particles, quarks, leptons, and eventually theoretical constructs like strings. Their aim was not unlike Chomsky's, to uncover the foundational patterns beneath what we observe. In both fields, complexity is understood to arise from simpler structured systems, often hidden from view. Not everyone agreed with Chomsky's model. While Chomsky theorized a universal grammar embedded in the brain, Geoffrey Hinton approached learning from another angle. In the 1980s, Hinton, often called the godfather of AI, pioneered work on neural networks. Rather than starting with a fixed structure, his models began with connection and adjusted themselves based on outcomes. This process, called deep learning, allows machines to infer rules from patterns in large data sets. Where Chomsky offered a theoretical framework, Hinton produced practical systems. His work demonstrated not only that learning was possible, but that it could be achieved through iterative feedback without preset rules. This contrast reflects an older philosophical tension, the relationship between the inner world of thought and the external world of matter. The 17th century philosopher René Descartes articulated this divide in terms of two distinct substances: res cogitans, the thinking mind, and res extensa, the extended body. For Descartes, the mind was immaterial and rational, the body was mechanical and governed by physical law. This dualism, mind versus body, or reason versus mechanism, has shaped Western thought for centuries. Even in the Romantic period, it appeared in the intellectual tension between figures like Percy Shelley, who embraced poetic intuition, and his friend Thomas Love Peacock, who preferred rational analysis. Understanding this divide also requires a glance at the education that supported it. In Shelley's time, those with access to education were rigorously trained in Latin, Greek, logic, and philosophy. Their education equipped them to grapple with abstraction in a way that is increasingly rare today. In contrast, modern mass education in the UK, US, and beyond has often prioritized outcomes and measurability over intellectual depth, shifting the goal from forming minds to producing market-ready individuals. In both linguistics and physics, we begin with solid, distinct elements, words, particles, data, but they only acquire meaning when we perceive the structures that connect them. Without structure, we are left with noise. With structure, we find harmony and coherence. Chomsky's deep structure may be seen as a cognitive scaffold for meaning making. In physics, subatomic particles might be the basis for physical existence, and in both cases, Structure precedes function, just as consciousness may arise from patterned neural activity. As we move from language to mind, from signals to sense, we find ourselves on the edge of philosophy. What begins as a technical inquiry becomes a reflection on being. The search for meaning has deep roots. Plato asked whether we recognize truth because we remember it from experience. Augustine, a 4th century Christian theologian and philosopher whose writing profoundly shaped Western Christianity, believed that understanding depends on inner light. Descartes grounded certainty in the simple act of thought, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Chomsky and Hinton, in very different ways, inherit this tradition. One looked inward to identify structural constraints of thought. The other built external systems that mirrored how thought might emerge. From atoms to words, from grammar to consciousness, our search for meaning continues. Structure matters, but so does what it leads to: awareness, understanding, and the nature of consciousness.